podcast in which one man strives to level up his geekhood and helping you do the same, one battle at a time. Now, let's get geeky with Gamer Leaf.
The air stood still. All the young Zephyr could feel was a bead of sweat run down the bridge of her nose. She grips the hilt of her sword, heart racing, as she fidgets uncomfortably under the layers of cloth and armor. The Zephyr is joined by hundreds of other pay-tool soldiers in rank. Everyone is visibly tense, and the pounding of the war drums begin to sync with everyone's heartbeats. Adrenaline courses through her blood, and she feels a burning sensation in the core of her horn. The horizon is a dancing blur of specks and color, impossible to clearly make out. Captains begin to shout, mobilizing their troops, and her rank begins to march forward steadfast. Billows of smoke contrast the dancing blurs, while glimmers of gold and rainbow break the black backdrop. Whistles blow from the rear columns, and the ground begins to tremble from behind. The Zephyr keeps marching forward, as fractal knights on horseback speed past the marching rank towards the colorful horizon. They charge forward swiftly and without mercy, drawing their magnificent blades of crystal. Everyone is ordered to draw their weapons. The blurs on the horizon come closer, and clarity begins to form. Marching toward the already advancing pay-tool ranks is a massive legion of Beshi soldiers, accompanied by several golden autonomous beasts known as Rainbow Knights. A splash of primary colors glow from the massive fractal swords, and it radiates the entire legion's front row. Zephyr feels a lump in her throat as the reality of the situation begins to sink in. This was the army with power so destructive to destroy the entire city of Plaingeist, and now they march into her nation's border. This is the invading nation with a display of devastating power. This is the Beshi Crusade.
Did that sound familiar to you? It didn't to me.
That's the story of Zephyr Wars, a new game on Kickstarter, and we're lucky enough to have the creator on, who is Max, the mastermind and creator behind it, Max Gillus. Is that right? Is that where you fit into the game?
Yeah, that's a good setting for the players, and thank you for having me on too. But yeah, that's like a good window dressing for the universe. Two nations at conflict. Yep.
Cool. And you're the creator. Is that right?
Yes, I am. This has been a personal pet project that I started in my senior year of school, and I took it as like a senior thesis project, and I used that as an excuse to work on a card game that I had wanted to make for years prior. So that's kind of the story of where it starts.
Well, there you go. Thanks for joining us on Getting Geeky with Gamer Leaf. Max, we really appreciate it. And as you heard, we have Princess Leaf on with us tonight. So,
well, it's a pleasure. It's nice to talk to you both.
Well, thank you. And so Zephyr Wars, for a thesis, did you go into game design, or what did you use Zephyr Wars for a thesis?
I actually went to school for illustration and fashion illustration, but I've always had like a strong love for board games and card games, just because it's what I'm familiar with my friends, and it's just always been a natural curiosity. So I wanted to blend two interests together and try to see if I could take a project on like that. So I explored game design, and then I took my illustration skills and kind of smashed them together, I suppose.
What do you do for work?
What do I do for work? Right now, I freelance illustrate. So I will, I just take commissions from people and I draw for cash. And outside of that, I've mostly just been working on my own personal projects, which I've been very fortunate to do.
Cool, personal project. So is this game, I guess this fits into one of those personal projects, I imagine?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The universe kind of started off as something I wanted to shape on its own, and I knew that a card game would lend well to it, so it's almost like a base for things I can turn into game design, but also it's just a universe I'd like to develop narratively separately, so they lend well together.
So can you tell us more about this thesis, or how that all came together and whatnot?
Okay, to be honest, I personally asked my professor if I could take this opportunity for a thesis project to turn it more into like something that I would work on past the point of graduation, and that this would be an opportunity to really, I guess, for lack of better words, kickstart it while I was in school. And my professor, Dan Scheffelman, has been incredibly supportive of that endeavor, and he gave me the okay. And I pretty much made a very rough early mock-up at the time, about 2 years ago now, and I presented that as my project, and it just worked on it since I graduated and brought it to the point that it is now, where it's in a playable and releasable state.
Cool. So I imagine you did a lot of play testing. Was there ever anything that you had to scrap during the play testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the game is a lot of timing and memory is key, because you and the opponent you're playing against have same decks. So kind of like chess or checkers or any game that requires memory, you have to keep track of what's in that other player's deck, and you have to keep track of what is in your deck and what you've used and what they've used. So in a lot of the early testing of the game, it was really crucial to fine tune the like the quantities of certain cards, or like, of course, what they do always requires tweaking, but a lot of tweaking came into like how many of certain cards characters or players would get while playing the game.
Cool. So how many did you come up with?
The decks are relatively small. They are 30 cards per player, and 20 of those cards are unit cards, which are essentially the soldiers that you place on the battlefield to fight and defend for you. And the other 10 cards are each unique tactic cards, which are essentially ability cards. I guess an easy correlation would be like spells and enchants from Magic that do very specific things. These cards do very specific actions that can kind of alter a player's turn to give them an advantage.
So do you make any other games?
This is my first real crack at game design. So as of right now, this is the first game I have made, and I'm trying to publish myself.
Cool beans. So let's see here. So it reminds me of so it's like a war card game kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So was there inspiration behind it? Did you get inspired from a different game or something?
Yeah, there was tons of inspiration from different games and other media outlets that I enjoy thoroughly. Like, I guess as far as the gameplay design is concerned, it's a lot of easy inspiration from classic games like the card game of War. There's a little bit of checkers in there, and then I don't know if you're familiar with Final Fantasy's Triple Triad card game, but there's a little bit of inspiration in the whole number system from that game. And then exiting the world of game design and just drawing inspiration from other sources. It's just a lot of video games, a lot of like Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, like I said, kind of also sculpted the motif of that game as well.
Cool beans. So with the Final Fantasy card game, yeah, I hadn't heard of that. What can you tell us about it?
Triple Triad's a really fun, simple game that uses just number values, similar to War, where higher numbers tend to beat lower numbers. So in Final Fantasy, when you place a card down next to, let's say, an opponent's card, if your number is higher than that opponent's number from the face side of that card, it will flip their card and turn it to yours. So it's a lot about board control, and again, timing and placement is a big element of Triple Triad. So I really like the idea of playing the right cards at the right time and trying to outthink your opponent. So I took a lot of the inspiration from Triple Triad and tried to inject it into Zephyr Wars core mechanics.
Cool beans. So if we sat down to play this game, what would it look like? Well, I guess what would it sound like, because we're on a podcast?
Okay, I'll try to visually describe it. So let's say you and Princess Leaf are sitting down to play a game of Zephyr Wars. You each take your deck. One of you would take Beshi, the other one would take Paytool. They're both identical with the contents of the cards are identical. The art's different, but you would start to, you draw your hand, and you would start to place your soldiers on the battlefield. And the battlefield is set up on like a 3x3 grid, almost like a waffle, I guess you could imagine, where you place the cards in certain zones of the waffle. Kind of a weird analogy, but we'll work with it. And the game would end up having you guys trying to spend your soldiers and defeat other soldiers on the zones and try to capture as much land throughout the course of the game. So by the end, you want to have the most power on the field. So a lot of it is, again, timing of, oh, do I want to like play this really tough unit early to kind of get a good foothold on the battlefield, or do I want to wait and save this card because I know my opponent still has their strong soldiers. I want to make sure I have something that can fight them when they end up coming on the field. So through a lot of playtesting, you can see a lot of players' styles of play adopt, and it's kind of fun to see how you can counter people, and it becomes like a little mental game at times. So it'd be a little bit of that when playing.
Cool. That sounds cool. So minus the what do you call it, the memorization, it reminds me of like, well, besides War and whatnot, it reminds me like a combination of War and what's that game the kids like, Summoner Wars?
Summoner? I'm not familiar with Summoner Wars. How does that play?
It's a lot like it's like kind of like battle chess, but there's like different there's a bunch of different factions that each player can play, and you're moving cards towards one another and fighting each other and whatnot. It's a pretty fun game. I know my wife and kids really like it, and it's a lot of strategy and whatnot.
Barbarian and Wizard Leaf like it the best.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I guess I'm sure there's probably some similarities. I wish I was more familiar with the franchise, but yeah, the game probably has some similarities.
Yeah, it looks like it. So, but there's a lot of memorization. Like, so what would we be trying to memorize, or how's that play into it?
Okay, yeah. The memorization key would come into play once both players get a little bit more familiar with what kind of cards are in their deck. So, for example, since you have soldiers, they each have different power levels. So naturally, you have weaker soldiers and you have stronger soldiers. And to become a stronger soldier, it requires more training. So naturally, they'd be less in. They'd be in higher demand, so there's less of them in your deck, and you have more weaker soldiers. So, for example, you might be playing a game where you've spent all your high resource soldiers, which you only have one of. So, for example, there's only one level 7, level 8, level 9, and level 10 soldier in your deck, and in the enemy's deck. So, at any point in the game, if they play any of those cards, you know that they've already been played, and you can try to memorize like what else could still be in their deck or in their hand. So it's kind of understanding the quantities of cards in your deck and which ones were played at certain points.
Cool. So I would want to try to see like if somebody played a certain number and they only had so many in their deck because we both have the same numbers. Is that what you said?
Yeah. The decks are identical, yeah.
Okay. And did you do the art for it? You said you were going to art school, I recall.
Yeah. I did the game design and I did the art on my own, and as I got closer to the completion of promoting the game, I had some lovely help from my good friends. My friend John did the motion graphics for the Kickstarter ad, and I got a voice actor, my buddy Ray. So like I've had help definitely with the promotion of the game, which has been great. But as far as all the art and the game mechanics, that took a lot of time. Of my own time and energy to like fine tune it all. So, the art I also did.
And did you finish school 2 years ago, or how did you play this all in with school, going to school and whatnot too?
I tried to very cleverly like make Zephyr Wars work with the projects I was getting in school, so I could still work on it. But I'm now graduated. I graduated about coming up on 2 years now, I think, and that time outside of school has just been like working on Zephyr Wars and making sure it's fun and finishing all the art or reworking old art to make it look a little better. So that's kind of been the timeline since.
What is a Zeratopia?
Or a Zephyr? What is a Zephyr? I think.
A Zephyr is a hybrid of a horned winged beast in the universe mixed with humans. Through the timeline of Zephyr Wars, there was like a big calamity that kind of wiped out the ancient world. I guess similar to the Big Bang theory with dinosaurs. And from the ashes of the calamity rose humanity again. And joining humanity was another race called the Zephyr, who look like humans, but they are kind of alien. They have unicorn-like horns that protrude from their heads, and they are female. like an all-female race of warrior women.
Oh, well, any specific reason you chose all female, or how'd that work out?
Um, I I'm working. I want to work. I've been working on a comic for Zephyr Wars, and it completely explains that. And I kind of don't want to push spoiler territory, even though, yeah, but there is a reason. It's just a lot of those answers kind of lie with the kind of race they were in the ancient world before the calamity.
So, seeing how you won't give us any spoilers, is there a way that anybody listening who might be interested in the comic, is there a way they can find out more on that or get the comic?
Yeah. So right now the comic is not out. I've been very slowly working on that. So I'm still writing the comic. So that is unfortunately I wish it was out, but if people are interested in the universe, I do tons of art. I put stuff out all the time on my Tumblr or my Twitter. That is all Zephyr Wars theme often. So I usually inject a lot of lore and information and other kind of details in the universe for people to latch on to and invest in while I work on the comic. So I guess if anyone just wants to check out my social medias, that's where they can find all that stuff.
Cool. And where would they find that? Like, I'll leave it in the show notes, but where would they find it?
My handle on all the social platforms is just Kinky Sketch. So I guess Twitter would be the @ Kinky Sketch, and Tumblr would be Kinky Sketch, I guess. So that's where I like to keep my stuff.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first on, well, maybe not first, but you heard it on Geeking with Game Relief. Cool beans. Let's see here. So, like she said, do you make any other games? Do you have any other games in the works, possibly after, depending on how this Kickstarter goes and whatnot?
Yeah. I've been exploring a board game options in design because that's also been on like a bucket list of mine, I suppose. I love board games, so it'd be really interesting to try to explore mechanics for that. I want to try to design a tile-based combat board game where everyone locks in their actions and then reveals them, and then all the actions play out simultaneously. So it would be a game of like predicting movements and actions before they happen, I suppose.
Cool. So like a programming mechanic. I think we played a couple of those.
Yeah, like that's a good way of putting it.
Cool. So do you currently have a favorite board game as well as a favorite card game besides Zephyr Wars as well?
This might be a predictable answer, but I've recently started playing the Final Fantasy card game, which mirrors a lot of Magic: The Gathering, but it's like, I guess, Square Enix's take on it. That's been right now consistently my favorite card game. As far as board games are concerned, I recently just started picking up the Dark Souls board game with a group of friends, which has been a blast. But I'm a sucker for miniatures, like many others. So I play a little bit of Warhammer 40k, and I enjoy a good game of Zombicide too. So those are like my board games right now.
Cool. And you said it was what was the name of your favorite board game? Dark Souls.
Oh, the Dark Souls, yeah.
So if you played, yeah, I didn't even know that existed until I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts. We're Not Wizards, where they sat down with, I believe it's David Carl or somebody like that, and talked about it. Because I guess Dark Souls, from what I heard from there, it was like it's a really hard video game that they made into a board game. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's interesting that like Dark Souls has become such an iconic video game series. So it begs the question of how a lot of those mechanics in the video game would translate into the board game. And the board game is hard. It doesn't quite match the mechanics of the video game 1-to-1, but they still found a way to make it very hard and challenging. And it's been really fun in a group.
Cool. So is it competitive or cooperative or both?
It's a cooperative affair. It's you and a party of your undead warriors have to navigate through like the lost halls and try to defeat bosses and enemies. And the game is very punishing on player death. So if any player dies in the game, you all get sent back to like the starting bonfire area, and you have to work your way towards the boss again. So it really pushes the cooperative angle.
Cool. Means I recently had on the podcast I want to say a couple days ago. The creator of if they're from Medieval Lords, I think that's the name of it, and they recently created they have a Kickstarter running right now. It's called Black Souls. It's a game where you're going up against other people and you're designing a really hard video game. It sounds like a pretty good idea.
Oh, cool. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they got a little bit left on Kickstarter. So, but yeah, that's cool. So, and what about card game? Well, you said card game with Magic the Gathering, or was one of the Final Fantasy? Is that what you said?
Oh yeah. I'm playing Final Fantasy's current take on card games, which I had drawn comparisons to Magic, but yeah, the Final Fantasy card game, kind of an unoriginal name, but it's just the Final Fantasy card game.
Cool. Is that the one that you drew inspiration from this, or was that something else?
I guess it just drew inspiration from Final Fantasy as a franchise in general. Yoshitaka Amano is one of my favorite illustrators ever, who did a lot of the cover art and still does a lot of promotional art for the Final Fantasy games today. He's been a huge inspiration. So I guess it's not just one Final Fantasy game, like not the card game, just all of it, I suppose.
Cool. And there's a bunch of different worlds. Or a bunch of different games. I never got into it or not. But is it a role playing game, or what exactly is Final Fantasy?
Yeah, it's an RPG, and thankfully you don't have to play them in order. They all have their own separate worlds and stories typically, and you can pretty much have a favorite that is not chronologically driven, and it's easy to recommend one Final Fantasy because they're all so different. So if you don't like one of them, there's probably another one out there that like I could suggest to someone.
So do you have a favorite of those?
Do I have yeah, that's a hard question. I guess I really like Final Fantasy Tactics because it's a unit and tile driven video game, and as far as their more conventional stuff, I guess I have a really soft spot for Final Fantasy 12.
Wow, 12 of them? Is there more than 12? Or is it 12?
Yeah, believe it or not, there's 15 right now. Those 15 official sequels, not counting all the millions of spin-offs they do. So it's hard to keep track of them all.
Oh well, I want to say, I remember them vaguely coming out with it. Was it the late '90s when they started, or when did they start? Do you know?
I think it was. I'm gonna get this wrong. Of course, Wikipedia could tell me. I think it was 88 or 89 was Final Fantasy 1, and ironically enough, it was titled Final Fantasy because the company was going under. So this was going to be their last game. It was going to be their Final Fantasy, and without them really being able to predict what was coming, the game ended up being a huge success, and now we have 15 plus Final Fantasies. So. Kind of a fun story.
Well, there we go. I guess it worked out okay for him, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
Cool beans. So let's see here.
Will your board game be set in
the Zephyr world?
Right now it's in such an early stage that I'm not sure what kind of theme or artistic setting I'd like, but it's definitely a possibility, and I think it would lend well to the Zephyr Wars universe.
Cool beans. Let's see here. So, yeah, let's see. Yeah, that's cool. So, what's been the? I know that you said this is your first Kickstarter. What's been the hardest part of Kickstarter thus far for you?
The hardest part of Kickstarter, I have to admit, I get a lot of anxiety from planning anything that requires shipping and handling with the post office. But thankfully, that I've been shown that that's all very relatively easy. And my anxiety is being driven by just not having done something of this scale before. But as the Kickstarter goes on, I guess just promoting super hard. And I'm sure anyone else who has tried or has successfully launched a Kickstarter could probably agree that it's hard to get your work shown because there's so many other like talented forces of nature out there on Kickstarter putting their games out there too, and it's hard for everyone to see all of them. So I guess that would be the hardest part so far.
For sure. So yeah, like I was gonna say is with if somebody's maybe falling asleep while they're listening, it wouldn't be because of your game or you. It'd be because they're tired of listening to my podcast. But if they have and they suddenly get jolted awake so they don't run off the road, why should they take a chance on Zephyr Wars, especially with all the other Kickstarter games they have out there?
All right, that's a good question. Zephyr Wars is light, portable. It is the size of a bicycle card box. It can fit in your pocket. And it's simple, and it should appeal to people of all ages because the entry of learning is very easy, the gameplay is very quick, and the level of social engagement when playing is playful. It's fun to try to like outsmart your opponent while you play, and it's like a fun, casual, quick game.
Cool beans.
Did you have fun making it?
I had a lot of fun making it. When not designing the game and the gameplay and the mechanics, I would go straight to the art and the characters and the world building, and then go back to the game design. So it's been a really fun journey.
What's the funnest part, do you think, of making a game?
The funnest part, I definitely play testing, which surprised me. I think that's the funnest part because you're giving people something you made to play in it, and you can see it start to come together, and you're gonna have to like put some band-aids on it and patch certain things and make things that are broken work, but you can see the end of the tunnel from there, and you can see the progress you've made on the project. So I think the funnest part was definitely letting people play test it.
Cool. Was that pretty anxiety driven as well, or just mainly the Kickstarter?
Well, I guess with any project that you're putting a lot of time and passion into, you're going to feel anxious about certain aspects because you're putting so much of yourself into it that you just naturally want it to work, or you want it to be as good as it can be. So I guess in short, playtesting for the first time did make me a little anxious because I'm thinking in my head, it's like, oh God, I've been working on these mechanics for a while now, and I want to make sure they work, and it could all just come collapsing down right now if the playtesting just shows like horrible design flaws that just destroy everything. So there's a little bit of anxiety, but I was still confident with the project and stuck through it and moved through the hiccups and kinks down the road.
Cool. So what was the major consensus of your playtesters?
My playtesters, no, it had been a little while since, I guess, the original, like the first couple playtests, or just like any of them.
Either or, yeah.
Like,
what have people said about this game before you got it on the Kickstarters?
Okay. Before, so like early playtesting was really crucial and helpful to making changes to some of the most important design mechanics. A lot of people had said that they thought the pairing mechanic could have been a little bit more. It felt too restrictive initially, and to explain the pairing mechanic in Zephyr Wars, when you put an enemy, well, let's say your opponent places a level 10 unit on the field, and the only thing that can beat something that's level 10 is any number that's higher, but level 10 is the highest physical card you can get. So let's say you're in your hand, you don't have any level 10 cards. Like, how am I going to beat this guy? What you can do is you can pair two soldiers together and combine the sum of their power to defeat, like the level 10. Let's say you have a level 6 and a level 5 guy in your hand. You can pair them together and place them on the field to make an 11, and that would destroy the 10. But initially, pairing would count as, if you paired two cards together, it would end your turn afterwards, because you can make two plays, or you can have two actions, essentially, a turn. So people never felt like it was a good investment to pair because it would end their turn. They can only make one attack. So through playtesting, I had realized that, okay, like if you pair, that should count as one action instead of two, even though you're using two cards. So once that change had been made, it really, really helped change the dynamic on how aggressive certain players would play, and people would pair way more, and it made the mechanic way more relevant than it had been prior to all the playtesting.
Cool. That kind of reminds me. I don't know much about it, but my wife is big into Fire Emblems, and she's always talking
Ooh,
about
okay.
pairing or whatnot of her characters.
Yeah, that's a great example. Fire Emblem does that really well. So it's essentially the same philosophy, I suppose. It's just getting two units that work well together to come together and take down a stronger foe. So that's exactly the kind of mechanic I'd want people to use, but they just weren't initially because the game needed a little bit of tweaking.
Oh, cool, cool bean. So have you played much Fire Emblems then?
Yeah, I've well, not recently, but I got really into the latest ones that came out. Birthright and Conquest had been really fun. I've yet to play Echoes, but it's been a really fun franchise.
Oh yeah, my wife's big into that. She was playing the Birthright and the Conquest, and we just recently got Echoes. I think it is. Luckily I was able to remember the name Fire Emblems. Always, before on the podcast, I can never remember that. I can remember the other names or whatnot, but yeah, this is the first one I want to say that I've remembered what it was and be able to bring it up. So how would is that similar to in any capacity to Final Fantasy? How they do their RPG games? Are they turn based as well or?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the genre of turn-based RPGs is so flexible. So most Final Fantasies operate on like a party-based turn-based system where it's like a small group of heroes fight another small group of heroes in like a locked environment, whereas Fire Emblem is more about controlling an army of soldiers in utilizing them on like a tile-based board. And I guess they could easily be called like turn-based tactics style games, and then an RPG is just a little bit more ambiguous as to what that can be.
Okay, cool bean. So let's see here. So yeah, that's cool. So besides those two, do you have a favorite? Well, I guess you said that Final Fantasy is your favorite video game. Is that right?
Yeah, Final Fantasy 12 is one of my favorite RPGs to date.
Cool. So the next section of I don't know if you listened to any of our podcasts prior, but the next section is AAA. Don't worry, it's not AAA where they'll come and pick up the card, but it's actually Adventures in Application Acquisition, where we talk about an application, be it cell phone or tablet or a computer or video game or whatnot. Is there an application that you use a lot of? It doesn't even have to be related to gaming, to tell you the truth.
Just an app, like
Yes,
a phone
sir.
app? And is it restricted to just cell phones, or you said
tablet,
tablets?
anything,
And...
computer game, video game. I don't want to. We already said Final Fantasy, so that'd be cheap.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm pretty detached from my phone most of the time, so it's hard to get me to sit down and use an app for an extended period of time. But I know this is kind of late to the party. But when Pokemon Go came out about a year ago, that was like a very interesting case where I was on my phone and I was playing an app and I was hanging out with my friends. It was a big fad, but it was interesting that was what got me to kind of care about my phone a little bit more than usual.
Well, there you go. Yeah, can we talk about that for a minute? Do you still play it?
Yeah. I don't actively play it very frequently. I guess once in a while, if I'm waiting or I'm bored, I'll hop on it and see if it's like any Pokemon are around. I think like most other like super casual Pokemon Go players do, but it's still such an interesting and fun social premise, and mechanically working that into an app as a game. It's interesting. So I appreciate when I go on it once in a while.
So what can you tell us about it? What are you doing exactly?
You're basically walking around with your phone and using the camera to throw fake Pokeballs at fake Pokemon, and you just build up your roster. But the fun factor is that you have to physically walk around and look for them in the real world. So it encourages a lot of physical activity. It encourages social engagement with friends and other people playing the game. I think I could be wrong, but I think they've recently added other features to interact with other players more. So it really encourages the social side of that game, past the actual like video gamey stuff in it.
So is that something people can get for free, or is that a cost app, or?
It is a free app that you can just download on whatever the equivalent of the whatever the phone store. That's just how detached from my phone. Or whatever the phone store where you get the apps are, you can get it for free.
So you can probably get
And,
them both on
I'm-
iTunes and Android devices, imagine.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for.
There
iTunes.
you go. Cool. Cool beans. So let's see here. I never really got into it because when they initially came out with Pokemon, I want to say I was on a mission for my church. But did you? I want to say I've heard of them before. We're not. So do you have any rare Pokemon in your Pokemon Go app or?
Me
Yes,
personally, I guess to any true Pokemon enthusiast, my collection would look rather lackluster. I don't have any incredibly rare Pokemon on Pokemon Go, but I've got Pokemon that I like, and that's always been the important thing to me when playing anything Pokemon is just getting the ones you like is the most appealing aspect of that game.
Which one do you like the best?
Oh, it's a hard question, but and this might be a lazy answer, but I love Pikachu. Pikachu's just my favorite Pokemon, hands down.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, I didn't get into it too much, but I want to say like a turtle named Squirtle or something, and like a Machop or Machamp or something, or my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, the like Squirtles is a lovable guy, and then I think so now I'm confusing the name. Machamp. He's also a couple of my friends like that one. I think he's the wrestling dinosaur
Yeah, he's
looking
like a
Pokemon,
big guy.
right?
I want to consider him like a rock, kind of like a muscly guy, but I don't know much about him.
Yeah.
Just seen pictures.
There's so many now. It's hard to keep track of all of them, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that's cool. So, if you own the rights to Pokemon Go, what would be one thing you would do to make the application better?
To make the application better, I would probably it's been a little while since I've actually battled in it, but I would try to rework the battle system to make it reflect a little bit more of the classic Pokemon that people know and love, the more tactical RPG decision-making sides rather than the tap in your phone as fast as you can. But I guess my only complaints are technical and hardware limitations past that gameplay design.
Cool. Well, if I don't know if they are, but hopefully we're striving to make a green podcast where anybody could come back and listen. But so if you're listening or listen in the future, people created a Pokemon Go, you heard it here first on Getting Geeky from Game Relief, how Max thinks you can make the game better.
Do you have any kids?
Do I have any kids? No. I do not. I think I'm still personally too young and lack the intense moral responsibility of parenthood. But I know other people my age who pull it off perfectly. So God bless them.
Cool beans. So let's see here. What was I gonna say? So with the Pokemon. So the fighting. So you're pretty much tapping the phone a bunch. You said.
Yeah, when I had last played, the combat system was very janky and unresponsive. It was a lot of just tapping your phone as fast as you can to get your Pokemon to attack, and sometimes I think you could swipe left and right to dodge, but at that stage in the game, it was just very finicky and unresponsive, and it didn't feel like you were really making any good decisions. It just felt like you had to tap faster than the other person.
So how are your tapping skills then?
My tapping skills are pretty poor. I've lost a lot of battles in Pokemon Go to the point where I probably won't be the best there ever
The
was.
younger kids, they're like, wow. To watch my son, he does the texting on his iPad with two thumbs, and it's like, wow, how can he go that fast and whatnot?
He's got the little robot fingers when
Yeah,
he's typing,
Yeah,
like a
it seems
machine.
like it. So I'm like, wow. And so, yeah, I'm still waiting for them to come out with MariKart Go, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to hold my breath. I don't know if they'll come out with that one.
How would Mario Kart Go work on your phone? Would you have to? I guess this would be kind of dangerous, but you'd have to like drive with your phone in front of you, and then the camera would have all the power ups in the AR virtual
I think so.
space.
Yeah, that's probably why they won't come out with it. Probably too dangerous. I think it'd be
It's too dangerous. You'd have to. Yeah, maybe one day. VR technology is going in pretty amazing places pretty quickly.
Cool beans. So yeah, so we wanted to thank you for we don't want to keep you all night, but we want to thank you very much for coming on Getting Geeky with Game Relief. I forgot to ask, Max. So if somebody goes ahead and backs Zephyr Wars, I know you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but what kind of time frame do you anticipate they might get their games?
Probably mid or late December, and to be very generous, maybe even January of next year, because from what I've heard from other people who've launched their Kickstarters, they said always be generous and be kind of a little bit careful with what you think can be, shipped out sooner than you think. Often, like, delays can crop up. You want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room so you don't disappoint people by having to delay something. Instead, just give them a little bit of a wait that won't kind of burn later on in case something
for sure,
crops up.
definitely. Now, I know you mentioned something about finding your art or whatnot, but so minus coming to your hometown to stalk you there, how would people go about finding you, Max?
Any social platform, like I'm on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and YouTube with the username Kinky Sketch, usually one word, and you can find my art anywhere.
Cool, man. What do you do on YouTube? Do you like show people how to draw, or what do you do over there?
Yeah, sometimes I stream, I draw on YouTube. I will honestly, it's a little silly, but I like to extend music where I just take a song, I edit it so that it loops for about 15 minutes, and then I like to draw art with the song, and I post it up. And to be honest, it's mostly for myself. I like to just listen to music on repeat when I work, so I honestly usually put the music I want to listen to on loop on YouTube, so I can put it in a playlist, and I can listen to the whole playlist. And it's kind of like a niche, obscure channel and reason to have one, but that's what I use it for.
And so if you sorry, on some of the YouTube channels, the art ones or whatever they do, I don't even know what it's called, but like where you're drawing or whatnot, and then all of a sudden you're doing it like really fast. Do you do that for your videos or whatnot? I don't know what it's called.
I think I guess it's been coined as a speed paint or speed art, where they just like you said, just push forward the recording.
Do you do something like that on your videos, or you just actually take the whole time?
I haven't done one of those in a long time. I think one of the first videos I ever pushed out was on that, and I should probably do more of those because they're pretty fun. I like to narrate my like creative process as the footage is sped up, so they're fun. But I haven't made one of those in a good while.
Cool, Bean. So well, we don't want to keep you all night. We really appreciate you coming on Getting Geeky with Game Relief, though, Max.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Gamer Leaf levels up. Tune in next week to see if Gamer Leaf's luck holds up.